Welcome to Pod Applaud, the Monday and Friday podcast that aims to enable your podcast habit. I'm your host, Seb, and today we are going to get musical with the podcast Tiny Desk Concerts. Before we get into it, I'm going to just quickly rattle off some stuff about Pod Applaud behind the scenes. Since Tiny Desk is relatively simple, and my script was short, this will be a good episode to catch up on some housekeeping. You may have noticed I said Monday and Friday podcast this intro. I'm cutting back 5 episodes down to 2 a week. I started Pod Applaud for a few reasons. First, as a way to prove that I could overcome my fear of putting myself out there. Second, I wanted to share podcasts that make me smile. And third, my girlfriend was out of country for 5 months, and I needed something I could do to keep busy. I still have a lot of shows I want to share, but I've proved that I'm capable of working hard and putting out a show without giving up or crumbling from fear of being disliked or not living up to my own expectations. Now that I'm reunited with my sweetie as well, I don't have 10 free hours a week to work on this project. So yeah, uploads Monday and Friday, 2 a week. That should be fine. Next, I figure since I'm talking music here on Pod Applaud, it's about time I got some of my own. I'm going to start experimenting with some different themes on the show, so be prepared for that as well. Without further ado, back to the show. Tiny Desk Concerts is a music podcast that features popular musicians playing a short set inside the NPR office. Bob Boylan began the show over 10 years ago and remains as the host today. Episodes range between 10 minutes and half an hour for the most part. New episodes are constantly being added. So far they have 578 available in podcast form. I've known about Tiny Desk Concerts for some time, although I have usually watched the show on YouTube. I would guess the show has 900 individual episodes by now, but it is hard to find a concrete number anywhere. Regardless, the show's huge backlog explains the feverish upload rate to the Tiny Desk Concert podcast feed. Tiny Desk Concerts is so named because the bands are cramped behind a tiny desk in an office with what I would guess to be less than 50 square feet of space to work with. Often, the limited space causes the musicians to play slightly stripped-down versions of their songs, or get creative with their approach. I think a big part of the fun of Tiny Desk is seeing how the musicians interact with the space in the small, intimate audience. For example, I recall Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine admitting how nervous she was between songs despite performing for huge audiences on a regular basis. I can confidently say something of the show is lost without the video. I love seeing 8 members of the Roots crammed behind a desk playing brass instruments and grooving. Now, admittedly, they have a video RSS feed, but this is a podcast and people listen to podcasts. That's just the way it is. Even the ones hosted on YouTube fall subject towards being a secondary tab in my experience. The show is still well worth checking out in podcast form, though, and has the added benefit of being able to be downloaded and played anywhere. There's usually a 5-second blurb at the beginning, stating the sponsors of the show. Bob tells us where we can find the video, and then the music starts typically within about 25 seconds. The musicians get right into a song, finish it up, and have some short banter with the audience. Then they go back into another song rather quickly. After a few songs, depending on the length, 2, 3, 4, the show comes to a close and there's a short ad read, maybe 10 seconds tops. Very little of the show is ad, so NPR has respected our time quite well with this pod. I would say the main draw of Tiny Desk is that you can easily explore so many different bands all in one convenient place. The show has a history of featuring a lot of indie and alt-rock bands, Although, as the show has progressed, it has started to feature more electronica, rap, hip-hop, jazz ensembles, operatic singers, and much more. So you'll either have to be open to the genres that dominate the show, or just be relatively open to all sorts of musical talent. For example, if you are a die-hard metal fan, you might be disappointed to find out, despite its 10-year runtime, the show featured its first metal band just this month. I'm relatively open musically. I enjoyed listening to Steve Martin's bluegrass band just as much as I enjoyed Big Crit or even the Blue Man Group. I'm going to give the show a rating and then close it out with some more examples of the group that have blessed the Tiny Desk stage. Here on Pod I rate shows on a 1 to 5 scale. 1 is silence, 2 is a slow clap, 3 is applause, 4 is a round of applause, and 5, of course, is a standing ovation. I'm going to give Tiny Desk Concerts a 4 to 5, a round of applause. This is a great show to mix it up between podcasts. Since I do Pod I always have a notepad on the ready when listening to podcasts, which is nice to jot down a band if I found them up my alley. The scope of the talent they get is quite amazing, and I like hearing the musicians being so personable with the NPR audience. The only real downside keeping this from being a perfect score is that watching on YouTube is a better experience. Although I do appreciate I can download the podcast and listen to it anywhere. That's been the show for today. If you found it valuable, be sure to subscribe for more podcast reviews. If you wish to reach out or follow me, you can find me on Twitter at Podapplaud or send an email to podapplaud@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and please tune in again. As I promised, here are some acts you can expect to hear on NPR's Tiny Desk Concerts. Wu-Tang Clan, Bad Bad Not Good, Weezer, Cat Power, Hobo Johnson and the Lovemakers, Tech Nine, Yo-Yo Ma, Mac Miller, Daughter, Superorganism, Randy Newman, DJ Premier and the Batter Band, The Shins, Chance the Rapper, Tegan and Sarah, Billy Bragg and Joe Henry, Peter Frampton, Chelsea Wolfe, and seriously, hundreds more.